You listen to a lot of podcasts, right?
I mean, define a lot. Do you mean many different podcasts? Then no.
Okay, you listen to a couple of podcasts.
I listen to very few podcasts a lot.
all right, sure.
Yeah.
But you got an idea about like just what makes a good podcast.
I mean, I listen to like history podcasts.
Right.
I'm not sure this translates to whatever we're doing here.
Well, yeah, but I've heard your stuff in the background. It's got like comedy and jokes and zingers.
That's last podcast on.
Okay, well that's a different podcast then, right? So you listen to a couple of different podcasts.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what goes into all of them is something that we don't do, which is like massive amounts of research.
Oh.
so that's why I'm like, where are you going with this? Because you're just gonna diss ourselves here.
Well, what I was gonna do is I was gonna ask then you as the experienced podcast listener that you are, if you were to rate our podcast, if you were to determine how it stacks up against every other podcast, would you say that our podcast is a 10 out of 10?
You're setting me off. You're setting me up for having to say no.
Oh man. Well, you don't have to say no.
Can we talk about something else?
Well, okay. This was my segue in. This was my.
I know. No, this is the perfect podcast. We do we done a lot of research. We have a perfect comedic timing. We have, we know when to be serious and when to make a joke.
There you go.
They land perfectly always. We have pleasant voices.
We're engaging people. We have interesting lives. Always have exciting things to talk about.
Yeah, we don't just spend all of our time at home wishing we could sleep more. So,
See, there's no room for improvement. It's the perfect podcast.
Experts on every subject matter that we cover.
No, so what this is Anna reacted a bit to that when because the new Zelda game out. Yeah, Tears of the Kingdom. I'm gonna say it's like, as far as titles go, it doesn't really hook me.
It's a very Zelda title.
It is, but it doesn't hook me because there are other Zelda titles with flashier names. Wind Waker, Skyward Sword. That's cool. Ocarina of Time is cool as well. Tears of the Kingdom, not my favorite title for a Zelda game. So I think that should take a point off.
No,
right? How could it possibly be a 10 out of 10
where Nick's
with
going,
a name like that?
Where Nick is going with is that
it's getting 10 out of 10s. It's getting like
everywhere.
100 out of 100s. It's one of those games that pop up every now and then that actually just like get a perfect score with a lot of reviewers. And I say now and then because typically it's Zelda games that get 10 out of 10.
Yeah, if you look at the games that always get 10 out of 10s from every reviewer, it's like Zelda, and then there's like 3 or 4 other. For some reason, I think Metal Gear Solid 4.
Well, you were looking at a picture of like some website or some games magazine or whatever, what they had given like perfect scores to.
No, this was a list. This was like a post on Reddit that was like these 10 games.
Yeah, but there's
like
no
10
such
out
thing
of 10s from several.
Well,
of the
yeah, but there's no
ones.
such thing as consensus. I know which image you're looking at, and I know it was a specific publication that was like IGN or something. I don't know, but anyway.
It was several, but that's what I was trying to get at.
I can look this up. It
was an image of these games got 10 out of 10s from these big, from several at the same time. It doesn't matter. The point I'm trying to get to is I'm like, why is it always Zelda? Like, what is it that I don't know, does Nintendo just have a dedicated Zelda journalist, reviewer, dick sucker kind of on staff? Or what is it? Like, I'm not saying Zelda games are bad, far from it, right?
No.
Nick is still busy trying to prove me wrong.
There. Only 8 games ever have been scored a perfect 10 by IGN and a perfect 40 by Famitsu. Okay, so it's 2 publications they were talking about.
That's what I said.
You said several.
2 is several.
Anyway, so yeah. And I'm going to say that Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, that is not a 10 out of 10 game. But it was like Soul Calibur, which is fascinating. Metal Gear Solid 4, that one I can see. Grand Theft Auto 5, that one I can see. And then just a couple of different Zelda games. Among them, Skyward Sword, which is weird because Skyward Sword is like not a 10 out of 10 game either. But yeah, it's like Zelda games always rate very, very high. Always have.
And we can go one of 2 ways here, right? The first one would be, and that's the one that we're not taking, I think, today, is the one where we go into, like, what's up with video game journalists and how do they come up with their wacky ratings, right?
They get paid.
Small tangent that I just wanted to start off with before we go where we want to go with this, right? But I had to look it up. So, and this is just IGN scores for the record, right? So 10 out of 10s would be things like Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, Resident Evil 4, God of War Ragnarok, Elden Ring, Disco Elysium, Last of Us 2.
Disco Elysium got a 10 out of 10?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Last of Us 1 and 2, Overwatch, Red Dead Redemption 2, Metal Gear Solid 4. 9s would be like Skyrim Special Edition, Stardew, Dead Space. These are games that I've played. And I got bored of it, so I just wanted to look up a game that I also think is fantastic, actually. Factorio got an 8. And I bring up these specifically because I also looked up what Detroit Become Human and Heavy Rain got. And they scored Detroit Become Human as an 8 and Heavy Rain as a 9.
Yeah.
So Heavy Rain is up there with Skyrim and Dead Space.
You have to realize that this was... It took a while before people started to see through David Cage. Most people still don't. Most people still have this idea of quantum or whatever.
Quantic Dream,
that their games are good. And back when Heavy Rain came out, people were like, whoa, this is groundbreaking.
Okay, but this was like, what, 10 years ago? More than 10 years ago? So
yeah, well, you don't go back and change review scores.
I mean... Some of them are fairly recent. I didn't check the date on it, but some of the reviews for games that came out a while ago actually were written in 2023.
I think it's very rare for like publications to go back and change scores that they've given previously.
Yeah, but that's kind of my point for the discussion that we're not having today actually, is that there's something really bullshit and wacky going on with video game reviewers. Yeah,
but there's an argument, but there's like, it's not even an argument, you have to look at the context of like when the score was given, right? That's how Overwatch can get a 10 out of 10, because when it came out, it was sort of groundbreaking. And yes, I know Team Fortress 2 existed, I know, but it didn't have sexy butts. Overwatch made it mainstream by adding sexy butts to the formula.
I'm not complaining about Overwatch. I am saying that there's games that are, even if you want to be like a David Cage fanboy, I'm sorry, but Heavy Rain and Detroit Become Human are clearly flawed just in a matter of things like frustrating controls and whatnot in the game, right? And so they shouldn't have gotten that.
And the illusion of choice.
Yes, I meant like even if you're falling for the illusion of choice, there are other things in this game that should be big detractors, but that somehow weren't. So point is, obviously there's something up with video game reviews by journalists, and what they think is a 10 out of 10 does not actually match what I think is a 10 out of 10 or what you think is a 10 out of 10, and that's what we want to talk about today.
Well, yeah, because
what do we think?
Well, yeah, because like if you look at it, how reviewing games works by design, there are genres that are never going to get a 10 out of 10. There's like entire genres. No game in this genre will ever get a 10 out of 10, because if you look at the metrics for what you actually get a 10 out of 10 for, one, video games are, and this might come down to a case of like self-deprecation or just shame. over the medium itself as being this sort of like nerdy low culture thing, and this is why David Cage games get a high review score, is because games have a hard on for legitimacy in writing. That because video games have had shitty writing for a long time. If you don't have to go back that far to like there were no real good examples of like a good video game writing. If you compare it to TV writing or movie writing, video game writing was so much more simplistic, and they couldn't get good writers to be interested in the medium at all. And here comes David Cage, this guy who calls himself a film director, even though he doesn't make films, and no one in the film industry wants anything to do with him because he's a hack. But he presents himself as a movie director and a guy who writes movie scripts. And this, by design, gives his... like it bumps up his games with like 2 points in the scores just from this.
Yes, but now we're going where we said we weren't gonna go.
What?
We said we weren't gonna rant about what the journalists do. We were gonna talk about what makes a 10 out of 10 for us.
Well, yeah, but can we go on a tangent on this though?
If it's a short tangent.
Oh, okay. Well, fine. I didn't know there was a time limit to my tangents.
There is, because if the tangent takes up the entire podcast, then we have...
Okay, fine, but anyway, but this is gonna it's relevant to our discussion as well. It's gonna be, like obviously we aren't done yet with playing It Takes Two. But that is a thing, though. This is an actual movie director who's shown up and be like, I'm gonna make video games, and everyone loves the idea of it because it affects the writing. So, like, obviously, like, It Takes Two is a fantastic game, and it should have a very high score. But does it get an extra high score just because it's an actual movie director who wrote it? Who knows? Another thing... And we can have our own opinions about this, is game length. And that is also something that absolutely affects scores that games are given from review sites and the like, to the point where we've talked about this in Let's Plays. We've talked about this when we were playing Final Fantasy VII Remake, that game developers will just pad their games and just add on more stuff that is just there to take up time, just so that the experience is going to be like a 60-hour game instead of like a 30-hour game, by having you backtrack and run through the same areas over and over again, and reusing assets just so that the game is going to get a little bit longer, because that's going to give it a higher score. And you can argue, like, should it be the other way around? Like, should a game get a lower score because it's just padding for increased game length? The idea of like respecting your time, is that something that should go into the rating of a game?
There is irony in this statement, given that you just went on a 5-minute tangent.
Well,
off topic.
It's not off topic. It's a tangent, but it's not off topic.
Well, no, but I really hear what you're saying, but we're going into several topics here, right, that we actually want to cover in separate topics, separate podcasts in the future. There's definitely a David Cage podcast in there, so don't waste all of your material, right? And we actually also wanted to cover at some point, you know, like, should video games respect your time? And a couple of other things in that direction. So I would actually really like to go where I want to end up for the rest of the podcast, which is, what do we think makes a game a 10 out of 10?
In that case, these tangents are just, we're setting up stuff for the future. We're giving you a reason to come back next week.
Exactly.
Because these are
Sneak
things...
peeks.
Yeah, little bite size. These are things we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, you're going to have to wait a while for the David Cage one, because I definitely need to play, what's it called? The Beyond Two Souls.
And I have to look up, like... defamation laws.
Oh, he knows I'm gonna just let loose.
Yeah, you're gonna, like, maybe we don't have to talk about the stuff like outside of the actual game.
We don't have to talk about what Quantic Dream is up to. Okay, fine. So, video games. I actually think, you said earlier that they don't go back after a couple of years and change the reviews. And I actually think that for me, people really should, because one of the things to me that makes or contributes to a game being a 10 out of 10 is, does it stand the test of time? Do you go back to it? And that's why, for me, I mean, we've said this before many times, right? It's like, I'm obsessed with Skyrim. I've played it so much. And despite the fact that it has its flaws, technically, that you can super easily correct with mods, that's another one, by the way. But it's just like, do you go back to it? Do you spend a lot of time there voluntarily? And do you go back to it time after time? That, to me, is a big factor. It's also about has the developer sort of kept the game up to date? Have they added stuff to it? Is it have they expanded on it?
Well, I mean, that depends. Some games are just like you're done with it, you ship it out the door, and then that's it. That's the finished product. Other games just have constant updates.
Well, yes, my point is, I feel like if they have constant updates, and if the game now looks different than it did then, or it's just like they've upped the graphics and made sure that it's still an enjoyable experience in whatever the year is, that should be a factor of it, right? Because if you go and you're like, I want to play a game, and maybe Overwatch is like a bad example because it's like you play against other people, right? But if you're just like, is this a good game or not, right?
Yeah.
You're not, for the most part, unless you're a video game channel like us, maybe, right? You're not going to be interested in someone saying, well, it was good at the time, but now it's not groundbreaking anymore. You're like, am I going to have fun playing this? And it's a 10 out of 10, then it influences your decision.
But it's a bit unfair to like games of different eras, because now you have the internet, right? Now you have video game consoles that are always connected to the internet, and where you can do like updates for games. That wasn't the case before. Like your Super Nintendo with your hey, you got Super Mario World. Is like, it's just a cassette with the game. There's not going to be any updates to it.
Yes, but this isn't targeted at games that are that old, because back then they also just shipped the finished product because they knew they had to, right? So that doesn't apply. But I'm just saying, like, and it's less about like, it's just some games improve. I never played it, to be quite honest, but I know for a fact that No Man's Sky nowadays, right?
No Man's Sky, yeah.
Is a lot better than when it was released, but it probably still has its release score. And there are games that were just released with promise of updates and things that never happened. And that maybe got like a score sort of also based on, well, and in the future they're gonna add this and then that's like on the roadmap, and it never happens. It's like, okay, you didn't deliver on it.
Yeah, and it's also a case of like, and games do this. You front load everything that's good in the game. You take the best parts that you made and you put that in like the first half of the game. Partly, I think, is for review scores, because not all reviewers are going to have the time to play the entire game. Maybe they play the first 10 hours and then they base their review like on that. And partly because, like, if you just look at Steam achievements and the like, most people don't finish games. Most people don't actually play through the entirety of the games they buy. For most games, if you go and look at Steam achievements for like who actually beat the game, it's like, it's not even half. It's not even like 50%.
Yeah.
So there's an argument for, if you know you're running out of time and budget, you take the unfinished stuff and you put it in the back end of the game. Lost Isolith.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Another thing that I personally think just bumps a game up for me, and this is just me personally, I know that this is very subjective, I think, and there's probably an entire podcast in there as well, is modability.
See, I personally don't care about modability. It's like, I very rarely do I ever mod my games in any capacity. I kind of like not having to do that. There are a couple of games where I have modded a little bit, right? Oblivion, dark UI mod.
To.
You kind of have to put the dark UI mod or otherwise you just can't play the game. But for most games, I play the vanilla version, and that's what I base my score on. It's like, I understand the idea that modability is like a perk. That's one half of the argument. The other half is like, well, how can you give a game 10 out of 10 if someone else has to come and like patch up the holes in it?
That's not actually necessarily what mods are for. It's just it adds to how long you can play the game. It adds content to it. So there are video games that are very mod friendly. Like, for example, my great love, RimWorld.
RimWorld.
It is a very mod-friendly game, and the developer, number one, constantly updates and adds, releases new expansion, and he, with their permission, integrates, like, things that popular mods do into the game. If he's like, hey, is this something that people like? Okay, I can make that a feature. But it's also, it just lets you do whatever you want with the game. And I think that's like a cool thing about, like, it's a colony sim. And you already have a lot of options, but modability means like, you want to have a colony of furries? Here you go. You want your space anime girl colony? There you go.
I do.
See? You for some reason, you want your colony to be overrun by zombies every once in a while. There you go. And you can just add whatever nonsense into it. You can add Stardew Valley characters. You can make all of the characters Final Fantasy characters, and so on and so forth. It's just...
But this is genre-based, right? Because not all games like are appropriate for... like.
No, clearly.
You can't, we're playing It Takes Two, for example. Like, you can't mod that game. It's meant to be experienced a certain way. Outer Wilds, it's meant to be experienced a certain way, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So you can't say that, well, this game isn't a 10 out of 10 because it's not moddable. It's like that has to be genre dependent.
I'm not saying that is a detractor, but to me, modability is something that can bump a game from a 9 out of 10 to a 10 out of 10. Because if they set it up in such a way, because look, I'm not a programmer, but I do know that some games are more friendly. Like, some developers are more friendly towards letting you mod their game and making that accessible and providing tools than others. Even if it is sort of appropriate for the genre, right? So I do think modability and even having an active mod community, to me, improves the gameplay experience. Like Stardew Valley. I can play it over and over again. I just add a new mod or take away a previous mod and do something differently. And then it's like you still play the same thing every time, right? It's just you farm, you mine, and all of that. But you have a little bit of variability in there.
It's like Civilization. You started a new Civilization game a million times. And
that's because I love getting the perfect
so
start.
do I. I'm saying not you Anna. I'm saying you as in everyone in the world. I like some. You don't even finish most of your civs because like the first 100 turns are like the most fun or something, and then it becomes a bit of a slog. I mean, that's also a discussion point, like replay value. Does a game have to have that? There are games that are like one and done. For example, Outer Wilds, I'm gonna say, it's one of those games where, like, it's very special the first time you play it, but there are certain games that you don't even want to replay. You just want, you have your one experience and your one sort of thing you got out of it, and then you sort of feel like, you know what, I'm done with this game. I have a 10 out of 10. Nier Automata is a game that I don't want to replay because I played it, I experienced it for what it was supposed to be, and now I feel like I don't want... It's almost like I don't want to taint the experience by playing it again. Right?
Yeah. I'm not saying modability is a must. I'm saying it can bump or replay value even. To me, I guess, replay value too. Absolutely.
That's where I was steering the conversation in. It's like, does a game have to have replay value?
No.
To be perfect?
I think it either has to leave you with the I don't want to go back to it because it's perfect the way it is, or it should have replay value. And I'd rather a game have replay value than waste your time with padding.
There is a game where I was thinking about this and I can't make up my mind, okay? And that is another game we played on the channel. It's very highly rated. I don't think it's getting like 10 out of 10 or something, but it's very highly rated. And that is Insomniac's PlayStation 4 Spider-Man, right? It is by far the best Spider-Man game ever made. And there have been many, many Spider-Man games made throughout the years. There are like dozens of Spider-Man games, and some that are like very highly rated as well. But this is by far the best Spider-Man game ever made. It's long, it's got tons of content, and most of it is fun. Big variety of like a big gallery of enemies, cool, interesting boss fights, which is kind of rare that you like. Because you have, I remember fighting Scorpion and Rhino felt a certain way. Fighting against Vulture felt a certain way. Fighting against Mr. Negative felt a certain way. They built up every encounter to be like sort of very, very unique and interesting. And it's got tons of content. It's long. It's well made. It looks gorgeous. It's fun. It's super fun. Love it. But then again, number one, it also has a lot of padding, just like achievement hunting and trophy hunting all over the map.
Oh God, I hate that.
And so many just like, hey, here's this, like, deal with this base of enemies. Do that 1,000,000 times and it's always going to be like roughly the same experience. And also it's, because it is a self-contained closed story, this is another game that actually doesn't have a lot of replay value for me. I don't really feel like I need to go back and replay that game once I'm done with it. It could be cool just because it feels good. It's just fun, but it's not like I feel... But that would just be it. I'd go back, I'd get the gameplay kick for like 20 minutes or so, and it's like, yeah, still fun, still well made, but then I'd probably just be done with it. So they'd have to add more content for me to give that one another whirl, which they did in it's a standalone game, but it's also
the Miles Morales.
Miles Morales. It's almost like an expansion, but they sold it as a standalone game. I haven't actually gone back and played Miles Morales, the follow-up, which I should. And soon they're gonna drop Insomniac's Spider-Man 2 on the PlayStation 5, which I'm also obviously gonna play. So it's weird. I don't know how to rate that one. Everything about that game is fantastic, but it does have padding and it has very little replay value. So how does that stack up?
I mean, it doesn't have to have replay value. We said that earlier. The padding to me is a detractor. Actually, like the BioWare games have this as well, especially like the Dragon Age ones, where it's like find every shiny thing, find all the spots. It's why I never finish.
I actually think that for Spider-Man they took it from the Arkham games, the Batman Arkham Asylum,
those two.
And hunting Riddler trophies. That's where that started.
That's the thing. It's like my lizard brain or something is like you have to collect all the things.
Yeah.
But then I get burnt out, and then I stop playing.
Riddler trophies in Arkham games are actually, like... It is very excessive. I think in Arkham Knight, there's like 500 Riddler trophies or something. It's completely bizarre.
Yeah.
I haven't even played Arkham Knight. Probably should. See, it came out... And when it came out, it had like a really shitty PC port. And back then I didn't have like a new console. And for the longest time, you just basically could not play that game on PC. And then once that got fixed, the game had already been out for like 3 years. And it's like, oh, it doesn't feel new and fresh and fun anymore. And I already know what the twist is.
I didn't even know there was a twist.
Yeah.
I played the first. What was it? It's
Arkham Asylum. Oh, you played that?
I played like a part of it. I never finished it. I think it's because I just got annoyed hunting trophies.
Well, but you know how the combat feels in Arkham Asylum, right? It's a lot. It's based a lot on like counters and just timing counters as the opponent's attack.
I was terrible at it.
Right. Well, once you get into it and get really, really good at it, it's actually super fun, and you know, it was a smash hit. So Arkham combat has been replicated in a million different games to the point where it's even referred to today as Arkham combat.
Yeah, didn't you say that Spider-Man was like that?
Spider-Man absolutely has Arkham combat.
And I think the Final Fantasy remake had some elements of that as well.
I'm not...
At least for me as an observer, it had similarities to the Spider-Man combat, and sort of I'm just...
Possibly. It was a bit more... There's a mix of different things. There was a little bit of like Devil May Cry in there. There was a little bit of Arkham in there. There's one game that like super just rips Arkham combat straight up that I think you would actually love. And that I know you haven't played, and that is the Shadow of Mordor games.
Right, I actually think I have the first one.
I am so baffled that you have not played these games. Is it just that you're not that into sort of like action games? Because it is Lord of the Rings, and you love Lord of the Rings.
That's why I bought it. But action games, number 1 and number 2, it's like it is because. Well, it's because it's an action game, but not necessarily because that is in itself a turnoff. It's because that is a game style that outside of me trying to play that Batman game 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I haven't played much. I know I'm bad at it. I would have to learn an entire new genre of game. And right now, I don't have the energy for it. You know, I play things that are familiar right now that I can do in my sleep.
Yeah. But it's like, I mean, it's not like you haven't played games like that. You have played Nier Automata, which is a character action game.
I wasn't any good at it, and I had to let you finish it because I couldn't do the stupid hacking system.
Yeah, but the hacking is not the combat.
Okay, well, anyway.
Yeah. You know what's so sad? That game, if we're going to talk about games that are sort of groundbreaking, it is. That game had the Nemesis system, right? Mm-hmm. And you've never seen that replicated in other games. Do you know how the Nemesis system in the Shadow of Mordor games work?
Sorta. I know that it's like you encounter these orc chieftains.
Yes, and they have names, and they have traits, and they have... everyone's different. They look different, they act different. This one's afraid of bees. This one's a coward. This one... It likes meat. What do I know?
And then they level up and they gain new traits as you encounter
and depending on your interactions with them is also going to alter them. I had one guy who became sort of like my main rival, and I fought him like a couple of times, and one time I fought him and I injured him, but he ran away. And then next time I saw him, he had scars from that encounter. That one ended with me. I thought I killed him by kicking him into a fire. And then he showed up later, just covered in bandages. And he's like, nah, bitch, you didn't get me. Still alive. And now he's just like has his own war band that he's running around with. And like it went far. To where he was just like messing with me constantly, and I just could not get rid of him, and he became stronger and stronger, and he actually started becoming a real problem for me. Tugog the Tactician. I still remember that asshole. But you're gonna be juggling a bunch of different ones, a bunch of different nemesises, and
I think it's Nemesi,
and they all have their own personalities. They can fight with each other to take territory from each other and things. And it made the game world feel so much more alive, because you're not just running around killing a bunch of random NPCs. Here you have like an evolving game world of enemies who... It's just AI. Like, it's just AI and procedurally generated stuff, but it feels like these are, oh, I know this guy. We're friends. We're frenemies. And, but you know what they did? They patented it. They patented
yeah.
the Nemesis system so that no one else could use it in video games, which is why no one else has.
I mean, they could. They'd have to pay them licensing fees.
Yeah. Warframe had that thing with, that was their original idea for like Kuvaliches, how they were going to work. It was going to be similar to the Nemesis system from Shadow of Mordor, but suddenly it wasn't. And I think because they ran into that, I think they ran into a fucking cease and desist. Because...
Possible, yeah. I mean, the thing is, yeah... If you think about what video games have done with, procedurally generated and AI and whatnot, this is often actually more of a hindrance than an asset.
Well, it adds replay value.
Yes, it does. But then if you think about it, what games have that, like Spore, right? Or No Man's Sky also struggled with it, where it's like, your game needs something else and not just the procedurally generated AI thing interaction. You need... And Shadow of Mordor clearly has that thing.
But it also has a story. And the story is like, it's okay. It's okay, the story in Shadow of Mordor, but it's not what the game is remembered for. The game is remembered for the Nemesis system.
Yeah.
That was like the really groundbreaking thing that made that game stand out. If it didn't have that, and it was just sort of like this Nier Automata style character action game in the Lord of the Rings universe, it would have been completely forgotten.
Yeah, from what I see, what people talk about is like everyone just plays a game of orc politics because they also fight with each other.
Yeah, it's so much fun. You're like, why do I don't care about the main story. I don't care about advancing the main story. I just want to play orc politics. And it's great. Mm-hmm. But then it's like, but that can't be a 10 out of 10 game then, right? If only like half the game is what you play it for, and the other half is a chore.
Yeah.
And that's pretty common in video games that you have that, right? There's always parts of the game that feel like a chore.
But that's what modding is for.
Adding more chores.
No, removing chores. Like, for example, I've played Stardew so much, I just don't want to do the stupid fishing minigame anymore. So I just have mods that let me fish without having to play the minigame.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah. Thanks. I've been there. I've done that. I've done my time. I always play games vanilla before I mod them, right? It's not like I go and I straight up just mod them. The exception being for Bethesda games, you kind of have to add like the unofficial patches or something that just get rid of all of the crashes, things like that. So no crash mods are an exception to the rule, but otherwise I'm just like, I want to see the game as intended first, and then I'm like, okay, where do I want to go with this? So Fallout New Vegas, which I'm playing right now, for example, I just installed a crash fix. But that's it.
Do you think a game can be a 10 out of 10 based on story alone? The rest of the game, everything else about the game is nothing to write home about, but the story is a 10 out of 10. Right?
I wanted to ask you that because when we started the podcast and you said some games, some genres by definition will never get a 10 out of 10, I'm guessing like visual novels. Do they even count as games?
They barely count as games.
Because
Doki Doki Literature Club would be the exception, I guess, because it's a horror game hidden inside of a visual novel. But
yeah, but I'm guessing we're not talking about actual games where you still actually have to play and not just click. Yeah. So we're not talking visual novels.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's like, what's a 10 out of 10? Are you having fun? Are you so engaged that you're like, I'm having the perfect time here? It's hard to say.
It's funny because
if the rest of it really depends. If the rest of it is like actually bad, like if it has awful controls and awful graphics and all of that, maybe not. If the rest of it is acceptable or mediocre, maybe. I can live with shitty graphics. I play like pixel graphics, whatever things all the time. I mean, I have bad eyesight. Super HD graphics don't do shit for me anyway. I can't see the details.
Yeah. But I have an example here, and it's like, it's not going to be Nier Automata. It's going to be Nier, the original one. They came out with a remastered version recently for consoles, or like a it's a remaster, not a remake, I guess. That game is like story wonderful, and you played Automata, so you know that Yoko Taro can write compelling things. And the original Nier is compelling, but that game has gameplay elements that are awful. Where like it's got side quests that you're not supposed to do. Because they are like almost impossibly mind-numbing, droning chores, and there's so many of them. And if you're a completionist, this game is a nightmare because it's just super not fun to do any of that. And Yoko Taro put that in as a way of like, I guess he doesn't understand how people work, because he was like, you're supposed to only do a couple of these. And then you're supposed to get tired of it and just keep on playing the main quest. He's like, it's there if you want it, but you're not supposed to do it.
Oh yeah, this is perfect for me, the person who never finished, the first time I finished the Skyrim main quest was, we were already together. It was about 5 years ago or so.
Oh yeah, you played Skyrim for several years before you finished the main quest.
Yeah, it took me a while. So things like that are awful for me. If I think if it's that might make it difficult for me to finish the game, and then it's hard to judge it, right? But for example, maybe something else that people acknowledge has a great story, but let me restart this sentence.
Okay.
So a couple of years ago, you were like, you should play KOTOR. And I tried, and I got so frustrated trying to walk places. Like, just with the controls. They are so clunky.
Did you know they're remaking it?
I'm waiting for that, and I'm probably going to play it because I wanted to play it and enjoy myself, but I got so angry just trying to walk through a door and things like that.
There are parts of KOTOR that have not aged well, at all.
I couldn't. So that's what I meant when I said is, if it is frustrating at this point, and I don't have, the memory of I played this when it first came out and it was great then, even the controls, then I just couldn't, even though everything I know about the story so far is compelling and I want to play it and I want to like it, but I got so put off by just like, if the game makes me angry just trying to walk down a hallway, it's lost me.
KOTOR is one of those games where it's like, there are people who would argue that KOTOR is a 10 out of 10, but I think most people would at the same time acknowledge that like it has issues. The game is like actually fighting against you at times, and you have to like just soldier through it to get to the good. And the good is very good. The good is like among the best things ever in video games. But it also has like you have to wade through some shit. And can a game be a 10 out of 10 even if there are portions where you have to wade through shit to get to the good?
I'm arguing no, because with the example of KOTOR, it just kept me from playing.
Yeah.
It can't be a 10 out of 10 if the shit is so bad that I just don't, if I can't.
Yeah.
And I actually think I have a pretty, like, maybe it depends on the game I'm playing, but I have a pretty high tolerance for frustrations in games. I mean, it's a motivator for me. If you think about it, it's like, okay, I'm going to do this again and again and again and again, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, if I'm not getting anywhere, So hard to say, but like, I think there's just like a threshold somewhere where it's like, if it's acceptable, mediocre but great story, why not? Because at the end of the day, why do we play video games?
Escapism?
Yeah, to have fun.
We hate our lives and we need like just to pretend like we're someone else for a couple of hours to keep the demons away.
to have fun.
Oh, that's yours?
Yeah, that's mine. To have fun, yeah. And if it's like, I am having the time of my life with this story, and the rest of it might not be anything to write home about. The controls are okay, I guess. The graphics are whatever. But I'm still having the time of my life with this writing and the story, and it's fun and all. I was like, yeah, that to me is a 10 out of 10. That's like, I am having a good time.
Yeah, I guess that's why all of this is subjective, right? Because there are people out there who's like, I don't care about story, who just are in for the gameplay experience. You know how I've talked about how I sometimes like review other small Let's Play channels and people asking for advice and like, hey, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? And whatever. I saw a guy playing BioShock Infinite and he was just fast forwarding through every piece of dialogue. He was like, I couldn't care less. I don't give a shit. He was not even listening to what the characters were saying. And almost like ADHD, like just he had a thing where he was like switching between weapons like 10 times per second. Just spamming the switch weapon button and just click, 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 click. And he was like extremely good at just the shooter thing. It's like fantastic. This is a guy who's played shooters his entire life. He's like not even paying attention to what he's doing and he's just steamrolling everything. But at the same time, he's just ignoring everything about the story. He just does not care in the slightest. And also complaining that the story doesn't make sense and he doesn't understand what's happening when they start doing the portal hopping and world hopping and stuff. And he's like, I don't get it. I don't get what's going on. While he has just been fast forwarding through dialogue and just not listening to it, which is kind of, it's a...
it might be a bad choice of game in that case.
But that's the thing. There are,
for them. For them. But the point is like, take BioShock Infinite and then just... I know it's a divisive game. I know, like, I like it. I'm one of the people out there who think that, like, BioShock Infinite, when it came out, was sort of praised. Then, as time went by, people have started, like, disliking it and disliking... actually, like, the writing is people's... main gripe with it. And the big thing is that people say that it's both sidesing racism. Because first the game is like racism bad, but then they have the slave revolt and the slaves are just as bad as their oppressors when they revolt. And it's like, oh, okay, so we're doing moral equivalence. And it's like, no, that's not what they're doing. But... And it's like, man, have you... Another tangent. Okay? Read your history, people. Read up on actual slave revolts. I was going to say there's actual historical precedent for that, but you kind of get it because they've been oppressed for so long that once you're free, you're like, I'm going to show you now. Like, you've killed my family. You've done these awful things to me. I'm going to
actual slave revolts that have happened in our history have been bloody as fuck.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Where was it? Which Caribbean?
Haiti, probably?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, Haitian slave revolts have been like really massacres.
There's been some, but anyway, let's not, because neither of us is an expert on that, but I happen to be aware of that fact as well.
I actually think that BioShock Infinite has good writing, and it's got good gameplay as well, but the writing is probably like what the game is remembered for. Just as being a shooter, it's okay. It's serviceable, pretty good, but not like groundbreaking or anything. So I guess if you're only interested in the shooter elements, then you're not gonna get particularly hooked by that game.
Yeah, and remember when we tried to like get my brother and Mike interested in
Outer Wilds?
Yeah, and they were like, "Yeah, I don't want to read.
Yeah,
I don't really care about the story."
Mike was like, "I don't care for reading when I play video games, and this game seems to have a lot of reading." So I'm not really that into it.
Yeah, but I guess maybe really a game just shouldn't have just one single score. Maybe there should be things like story, gameplay, graphics, like but
nowadays you sort of just give the game like a number, but it used to be more detailed, that you did break that down. You did break it down into like graphics and gameplay and writing and a bunch of other sort of like subcategories that you gave your own scores to, and then you aggregate that into the final score. Maybe a lot of people still do, what do I know? Or maybe people are just a bit more esoteric in how they review games and just write an article, give their reasoning, and then end up at some sort of number value.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I can understand why they'd want a one number value. I wouldn't want these to get aggregated because, for example, for me, and I don't particularly care for how fantastic the graphics are, right? So I can, to me, a game with mediocre graphics, if we just have like, 3 that add up to 9, right? And the story is perfect and the gameplay is perfect, but the graphics are shit. So it's like 3-3-0. That would be a 6 out of 9. To me, that would still be a 9 out of 9.
Yeah.
Because I don't care. For other people, who don't care about the story, for them, it doesn't matter if the story is good or not, right? So long as the gameplay loop and the graphics are insane. And then, so my ideal world of video game rankings would probably just have like 3 or 4 columns for each game, and then I could sort, like I can just filter out, like I don't care if the graphics are bad or something, and just pick something to play.
And here you go. Now we can fix that thing about like old games, because now we can go back and we can add a new category that doesn't affect an aggregated score, but we can add it later, which is, has this game aged well?
Yeah.
And that is how you that is how you Leisure Suit Larry.
Were they ever considered good though?
They were never good, but it's funny. I used to watch like a lot of Game Grumps, and Dan from Game Grumps, because he grew up on Leisure Suit Larry games and he loved them, and he's talked about that on Game Grumps. They're like how that's like a big part of his childhood, and it's like, oh yeah, Leisure Suit Larry. And then they did the thing where they were gonna play one of the Leisure Suit Larry games on the channel.
It's a terrible idea.
And then they encountered portions that were like very sort of like homophobic / transphobic, because like that was the style at the time for certain video games and certain or rather for comedy. Like comedy in the 90s, there were things that people joked about that you just don't today.
Yeah,
and Dan was like, ooh, didn't remember this. Ooh, don't like this. Feel like I have to apologize now for us playing the game on the channel.
It's like, but that's a weird thing about the 90s. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I kind of feel like because of like taboo laws and whatever that were there before, the comedy in the 70s and 80s has in part aged better than the 90s, because oh my god, the 90s were so homophobic in their humor.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about that for Final Fantasy VII Remake, right? Because there was that scene in Midgar, Cloud's cross-dressing scene. Before Remake came out, everyone was dreading it. Everyone was like, oh my god, what the fuck are they gonna do about the cross-dressing section? Because that is the part of the original game that has aged the worst. And we were like, oh, Final Fantasy is gonna get cancelled now, isn't it? This is it. This is the end. No more Final Fantasy after this, because it's gonna get cancelled. And then instead they just took that section and turned it into this sort of like beautiful, affirming thing about how love and beauty has no gender, and you can express yourself any way you want. And it's like, wow, they took the really sort of like not cool part and turned it into arguably like the coolest part of the entire game.
God, it's my favorite scene in the entire game.
I love it. I love it.
Yep, absolutely. Another thing I thought about in terms of like what for me would be a detractor for a video game, and then maybe another category. Oh my god, we're up to like 5 or 6 categories now, or whatever. I'm like, I cannot consider a game a 10 out of 10 if it has graphics requirements of you have and like technical specifications where you need the highest, newest possible hardware, so it's inaccessible to the majority of players. especially with graphics.
Console games don't have that issue because everything is like
PC
made for
games,
the console.
Right?
Yeah.
If you have to upgrade your graphics card every single year with the prices that we're at right now, or and just
okay, but now then it becomes a class issue. But no, I disagree here. I think there's some value in like just pushing things to their limit, and I.
Yeah, there's value in it. Maybe make it a 9 out of 10 value. I'm just saying it's not a 10 out of 10 if the majority of people can't play it.
Well, that was a thing when The Witcher 3, when it came out. That game was absolutely like pushing hardware to its limits. And you actually really did need to have a pretty good rig to play The Witcher 3. And that game is like a 10 out of 10 for a lot of people.
Now, but that's why I said you can go and change ratings later. But when it came out, if people just couldn't play it.
There were people who couldn't play The Witcher 3.
Yeah,
sure.
And it's like, man, not every game has to aim to be a 10 out of 10. It's good that you push boundaries. I'm just saying you have to accept that that is a negative point for your game if it's just only accessible to a small amount of people.
Are you saying that there are games out there that are Oscar bait?
I mean...
well, yeah, there are.
David Cage tries every time. He's bad at it, but
the God of War games are definitely the gaming world's version of Oscar bait, where it's like, look, the new God of War games are fantastic. I played the new God of War games, and I love them. They're great, but they are Oscar bait. They have all of the stuff that traditionally is going to give a game a 10 out of 10. They have the nowadays the sort of deep stories and morality plays, and it's like, a guy with a dark past who is struggling to redeem himself, and he does it through fatherhood. It's like, come on. And it's got the cool graphics. It's got the padding in there, so the game length is up to those 40-50 hours, and it's got the RPG elements. You gotta have some RPG elements in there, and it's got some wacky side characters with some humor. And the first one is, it's a blue dwarf. The second one, it's a talking squirrel.
It's a head.
Mimir as well, but yeah, Ratatusker, the talking squirrel is in the new one. So it's like... It's like it's a game that's designed to get a 10 out of 10 in ratings, because it checks all the boxes for what a typical 10 out of 10 game is supposed to have. And it's like the new Zelda game, I don't know. Obviously, it gets the Zelda bump. It gets the additional plus 2 points in that top 10 rating just because it is a Zelda game. And I've seen people who are like, oh my god, it's 3 times as big as Elden Ring, so you gotta give it a 10 out of 10. And I'm like, that's a bit much.
That's too big.
That's a bit much, because then there's gonna be collectibles, aren't there? That's it, right? You're gonna have to collect another 300 Korok seeds so that you can get a golden poop.
Yeah. Another thing... Maybe that doesn't go into the rating, but I don't know if this goes into the rating. You tell me, but as an apropos to some of the sounds that you may have heard in the background of this episode...
She's so drooly.
we're about to have a player 2 or a player 3 as is, and I kind of miss that co-op in video games is just starting to die out a bit. Like, it was so common, local co-op when we were kids.
Yeah.
And
I mean, Josef Fares is trying to revive the concept of co-op in video games.
I'm very appreciative for that. But, I mean, this comes on, what was it, Overwatch 2? Where they wanted to do a co-op mode, and just recently...
Oh, no, no, PvE. They wanted single-player campaign. Was what it was.
Oh, I thought it was co-op
No,
PvE.
single-player campaign. which you just scrapped, and that was the whole point of making Overwatch 2.
Never mind. Then not Overwatch, but still, how many new games aside of Yosefaris, right, really have like actual you and me together, not against other players, but just playing the game.
Army of Two, right?
Or maybe 3, right? I really wish there were more of that. So I tend to view it favorably if a game has the option. It's not like if it doesn't have the option that I would take away a point, but I would probably give a plus to a game if you can do it together. Like in a meaningful way.
Yeah, it's still sort of like Nintendo, right? Where you have Kirby and Bandana Waddle Dee.
Yeah. I mean, those are like perfect for especially having a kid playing with you.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a couple of years before she does that.
Yeah, but or for example, Mario Kart with you can put this antenna on the back that it just kind of basically drives itself. So what I've done with kids that I was just watching at the time is, 3-year-old kid, you put them on your lap and you're like, do you want to press that button? Which is like, the drive button. Mm-hmm. And when I tell you, you press the button. Or do you want the stick? And then they can pick. If they pick the stick, it still doesn't really matter because it basically drives itself and I accelerate. Or they accelerate and occasionally you just kind of stand there because they forget to press. But then you're like, come on. And they're like, okay. And then I steer, right, with the
10
thing.
10 out of 10.
But seriously, they have fun. They're like, they can see sort of that their controls are doing something, can participate, and they can even drive a race. Like I was driving races like that against my sister. So I have a 3-year-old on my lap that's like a part of the steering, and we're driving against my sister. Did we win? No, but we also didn't come in last place. So
hey,
and
yeah, but that's because Mario Kart has adaptive AI. So if you suck, the AI also gets worse, so that you don't come in last.
Well, if someone comes in, really?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, but that's good.
Yeah, I know.
That's good. I mean,
it's also like if you're too good at the game, then the AI is going to start pushing your shit in.
But that's I felt sad for a second, but actually that's good because that's where I'm going. It's like it lets people feel included. It lets, you can play with your mom. Maybe not your mom specifically. We played it with mine.
My mom would never play the devil box. No, now I'm making it sound like she's a religious fruitcake.
She's not.
No. She's just a technophobe.
Yeah. She I think she's also forgetting maybe a little bit things that she used to know because now she has an iPad and I think modern devices make people forget knowledge they previously had because now you don't need to know anything anymore. But that's another matter entirely. But I think it's good if games have that let you participate kind of with people that would be other ways intimidated to just play together as a family, as a group of friends. I mean, my sister and her boyfriend were here just last week, and I was really combing through my Steam library trying to find something we could all play together co-op wise, and I'm like,
yeah, that's another thing, like because it's genre dependent, right? A social game is never gonna get a 10 out of 10. You're never gonna have IGN give the latest
Mario Party
or Jackbox or whatever quiz game is never going to get a 10 out of 10. Scratch that, because I think there is a social game that has been like a 10 out of 10 game when it came out, and that's Guitar Hero. Right? Because that game got such insane stellar reviews when it came out. Because I guess it was groundbreaking.
I don't know.
Did you ever play Guitar Hero?
No.
Oh, I played the shit out of Guitar Hero. I had a crush on a girl, so I bought her a Guitar Hero guitar, and then we were friends, so I just played it all the time when I was at her place. It's kind of pathetic.
Yeah.
She wasn't really that into it. She was a little bit into it.
Okay.
But it was mostly just something you pulled out at parties, right?
Yeah.
That's what that game was for.
I guess. Yeah. But they're probably not gonna get the 10 out of 10.
So in summary, it has to be moddable. It has to have infinite replay value. It has to be able to be played on a potato.
None of these
It has to be a social game.
No.
It has to be written by a famous Swedish movie director. What else? What other criteria have we covered?
None of these are requirements. These are just things that add points for me that aren't typically considered in video game reviews. That's what I mean. It's like these are plus points for me that will make me overlook other flaws and still give it a perfect score, if present. But they're not standing the test of time. And that doesn't mean necessarily replay value. It just means, does it hold up today? If someone were to play it for the first time today, then that is a requirement for me. Like, say a game that has perfect writing otherwise, but like all of the humor is just homophobic jokes. I'm like, you can't give that a 10 out of 10.
No. So... I mean, I guess that is Leisure Suit Larry. I mean, it's
not perfect in every other way.
No, but like, if you look back at the writing, it's like it's all homophobia and misogyny, right?
Yes, homophobia, misogyny, and just like scat. There's a scene where you get like an enema and it feels like an entire swimming pool.
You're right. That is a scene.
So, yeah.
At first, I was going to be like, is that going to be the podcast title? Homophobia, misogyny, and scat. But
what makes a game 10 out of 10 for you? Homophobia, misogyny, and scat. No.
Maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I'd argue that the Leisure Suit Larry games are more misogynist than they are homophobic, and they're plenty homophobic. But the base idea of you're this icky little guy and you just want to like get with all the hot women.
I mean, it is self-deprecating in the fact that Larry is presented as a loser, right? You're supposed to find him pathetic, but it's still the framing of everything around it shows that women really are these floozies that he treats them as. If you're gonna
and it's like it's just done wrong, because like if you play Monkey Island, Guybrush Threepwood is also shown to be a loser.
Yeah,
but
he's not a creep.
Exactly. And it's like you can be the one without being the other, and Elaine loves him in spite of all of.
See, it's wholesome, right?
I love Monkey Island.
Yeah, it
games.
is wholesome. It's about loving people for who they are.
Mm-hmm. Even if occasionally they run around covered in feathers, pretending to be a chicken devil.
Chicken devil.
No, but in summary, a game has to be fun.
Well, hot takes here, people. Anna with the hottest of takes.
Well, I don't think David Cage games are fun, and they got good reviews. So,
yeah, I mean, it's like I was gonna be like, "Ooh, what about Dead Space?" But no, Dead Space is fun in its own way. It's captivating. Maybe fun is a bit simplistic of a word, but it's got something that sucks you in, that makes you want to keep on playing it. David Cage games are not fun, and it's just the worst movie in the world where you just have to click buttons to get through the dialogue.
That's the next thing. It is awful writing, and then it has quick time events. It's like, miss me with that.
Ooh.
Yeah. But these are our hot takes on what makes a game fun. Or, no, what makes a game good. Feel free to disagree.
There you go, people. If you disagree with Anna, that means you just don't enjoy having fun. You want your games to not be fun.
Or you can just let us know in the comments.
Alright, you think we're done?
Yeah.
We're done. We're done, people. We're done.